Hello, and welcome to another episode of Movies, They're Pretty Good. I'm your host, Travis Dudding, and today, I had mentioned it before on the end of the last episode, but in case you missed that, or whatever, or, were confused by why I'm not doing a David Lynch movie when I've been doing all of the David Lynch movies, taking a short break for the next 3 weeks. A couple reasons. One is a scheduling thing with the guest I want to have on the next David Lynch movie, but the key reason probably is that I was really excited when this set of the X trilogy came out from A24. And just really wanted to do these three movies. I do really like these movies. I think they're just so fun and so, just a breath of fresh air like in horror. And I think it's like nice to have like a new franchise, I guess, that's not so just like cookie cutter slasher, and I like those and everything. And but it's basically either like slashers or The Conjuring, and this is just its own thing. They did three, got out, great, and I really liked them. But I really like this set. Here, I'll take the plastic off since it's reflecting the ring light. But it comes with like a nice little book and everything, all kinds of behind the scenes photos and whatnot. Got like, it's got the 3 discs. They're all on 4K. Each have their own set of special features and everything. Great stuff, and now starting out, we're doing obviously the first one that was released, which is X, and this is the one that I had not been able to get a good copy of on Blu-ray or anything like that. They had never released it on 4K in the United States until this set. And I think the same with Pearl, if I remember right. I had the Maxine 4K. I still do. I haven't done anything with it yet, but I believe this was the first time that the first two were released on 4K in the US, like I said. And I'd seen it on Blu-ray back when it came out, and I was like, oh, I'll wait on that. Waited too long, and then I can only ever find it on DVD at Walmart. And it's DVDs corrode so quickly in quality compared to the better discs, So I just had a feeling that there would be like a 4K release down the line, or I'd come across it at like a thrift store or something like that. But luckily I didn't have to, because A24 put this set out, and super excited about it. I also from A24 got the novelization of X, which I haven't finished reading yet, but it seems so far that it's it's pretty much just the movie. I don't know that there's anything extra in it. If there is, and I happen to finish it before I finish this little mini series, then I'll fill you guys in. But so far, it's just it's the book, or it's the movie. Also got the soundtrack on vinyl. Haven't opened it yet, but it does look like it's just it's just the score. Like, it doesn't have like any of the songs. Like, it doesn't have Landslide or Don't Fear the Reaper on there. Yeah, it's just fun to have stuff like this. And I also have probably a very much unauthorized VHS bootleg of X, but which is awesome. I don't even know if this company is around. I'm not trying to like blow up their spot if they're doing anything that's not legal. But it's super fun to just have this. The only problem though is that I feel like it's not like my VCR is hooked up to a CRT, which I've showed that before on the podcast. And a lot of newer stuff obviously is framed in that widescreen format, whereas, back in the day, everything was like by default, the TV was the 4:3 aspect ratio. So, but yeah, that's the only problem, is sometimes it's either, I wish they would just, cut it, and then have stuff like cut off the sides, because I know like doing a pan and scan nowadays would be a huge pain in the ass. But a lot of times they just end up looking like stretched, or like compressed. So it looks funny, but it's most like, honestly, the main reason I bought this on VHS was just to have it on my shelf because I thought it looked cool, But I have a couple others that are like that. But yeah, this one I didn't see it in the theater. I could kind of hear some of the buzz about it, just from being online or listening to podcasts, things like that. I knew that there was some buzz around it being like a pretty good horror movie. And then once Pearl was coming out and how interested I was in that movie kind of made me like, okay, if these are connected, then let me see the original one. Watched it on probably Paramount Plus, in the least awkward way, which to watch a movie about porn in the 70s is with your parents. So, but it's whatever. Like, once you hit a certain age, like, you don't give a shit about that. At least I don't. But it's not like I'm gonna sit down and watch Caligula with them. It's still a rated R movie. Like, it's nothing that it's insane. But yeah, I loved it the first time I saw it. Then once Pearl came out on Blu-ray, I bought that and watched that, and then was, I probably day one on Maxine, I saw it in the theater. So that's the only one I've got to see in the theater. If they do like a re-release at any point that, coincides with my schedule, I'll try to see them in the theater because I do love all these movies. But let's just get right into the movie. So I like the way it starts out. The opening shot is like out of a barn door, but it is like the barn door kind of creates a like an artificial 4x3 framing of the main farmhouse. And then you kind of come out of it and it, expands it to the full like widescreen framing. I don't know the exact framing because I know there's multiple types of widescreen, But I liked that. I like that transition. It's very creative. I don't even think I really clocked that until I was listening to the audio commentary on this new set with the director of photography and the set designer, and they pointed that out. I was like, oh yeah, I never really thought of it that way. But like I said, kind of slowly comes out of the barn on this farmhouse, broad daylight. There's a cop car. The sheriff arrives, there's bodies on the ground, so it's like they're just now starting an investigation into whatever happened. Where you've just seen like all this evidence of, multiple bodies. There's a hatchet like chopped into the deck and, all this stuff. Go inside, there's a preacher on the TV. They're just kind of looking around, and then one of the other deputies comes up to the sheriff, and it's like, hey, you're going to want to come see this. They go down into the basement, and we don't see what they see, but we just see the sheriff just go, my God. And then, cut to someone doing lines of cocaine on a mirrored surface, snorting it up with a $2 bill. Pops up, we see that it's Mia Goth as her main character in this one, Maxine. Now, she does play both Maxine and Pearl, the old woman, in this one, and obviously young Pearl in the prequel, Pearl. So yeah, she's there. She's doing coke. In comes this guy with a cowboy hat. His character's name is Wayne. I forget the actor that plays him. And then we see like a little thing saying that it's 24 hours earlier from the opening scene. So whatever happened, like it's all in a 24-hour period, basically. So they're talking. You can tell that they're a couple. And he's visibly older than her. And we'll get more into that as the plot goes on. Then after he leaves, I think she does another line, and then like into the mirror goes like, "You're a fucking sex symbol." And then, cut to her exiting the building. We see that it's a strip club in the middle of like this like industrial park. There's like refineries and like all this stuff. It's middle of Texas. I forget if they say where exactly. I think maybe Houston. But you got the that one song. I think it's Mungo Jerry. The "In the Summertime," that one is playing. We get a big red, white, and blue 1979, and so now we know what year it is. Jump in a van. I think the van says like plowing service or something like that, which I maybe a front, or or it's just kind of funny the fact that they're about to go make a porno and the van says plowing service on it. In the van, there's we have RJ and Lorraine. RJ is a university student, film student, I'm guessing, because he's helping make the movie. He's going to be basically the cameraman, DP, whatever, and the editor. We'll learn. Lorraine is his girlfriend, played by Jenna Ortega. She's basically helping him out, but also is like the boom operator. We got Bobby Lynn, played by Brittany Snow. We got Jackson, played by Kid Cudi. And Wayne, like I said, forgot what actor that is. And basically the only actors I don't know from other shit are RJ and Wayne. Everyone else is recognizable and, but, so, whatever. You have access to IMDb. You look it up. And then, Maxine. So Wayne's driving. Maxine is in the front seat, shotgun. And then everyone else just kind of in the back, no seatbelts in the back of this van. Pull up to a gas station. Someone goes to pump the gas. The others go inside to get some supplies and stuff like that for their weekend. This is where we, as the audience, figure out what kind of movie they're making. I mean, it's pretty obvious what it's going to be, but there is a conversation between RJ and Lorraine where she's like, "You okay, like making this kind of movie?" And she calls it smut, and he's like, it may be a dirty movie, but I'm trying to make this like like the avant-garde of that the French are doing. Like he's trying to like make this like this high art genre porno, and then it's like the type of thing that gets talked about in Boogie Nights, and then you never see the actual like that you never see that quality. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there that are actually come close to that, like that one Through the Looking Glass, I feel like was one that like people somewhat took seriously as a like surreal artsy adult film, compared to other ones. And I'm sure there's other I'm sure there's other examples of that, but that's just the one that comes to mind. But yeah, this is his whole like thing about it, and he's being defensive about it, and it's like, no, like yeah, it's like people having sex, but like there is like artistic merit behind it. And we're cutting back and forth between outside of the gas station, inside the gas station. Wayne and Maxine are inside shopping. Maxine's talking about how she doesn't really like Lorraine, and she's just staring. It's like she's judgy and stuff like that. And, Wayne's just like, well, if you want to be in this business, you got to get used to people staring, that type of thing. And also just being like, hey, you don't like anyone, because I think she starts a conversation. She's like, I don't like his girlfriend. And he's like, you don't like anyone's girlfriend. So, but yeah, they're having their conversation inside. At some point, he says something. It's like, why I like you? Because you got that X factor, that type of thing. So, pretty much like the titular line, basically. Because it's like you have the X factor, and then it's X because it's rated X, So it's like there's multiple meanings for the title, not like it's like, oh my God, that's what they mean, it's just it's clever, but it's not that clever where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It just feels funny to point it out as being clever when it's just like, I kind of feel like that's an obvious thing, but that's just me. Now outside, they're kind of getting ready to shoot like one like small scene. there's a small conversation that Bobby Lynn's talking to RJ, and she's like, so, like, how is it that you don't have to shoot this, like, in order? And he's like, well, like, I can just shoot it, and then later on in the editing room, I'll piece it together to make it, flow and look good and all that stuff, put all the extra magic on it. And Bobby Lynn goes over to talk to Lorraine, and she's like, oh, your boyfriend's kind of cute. Like, do you help him with all his movies? And she goes, sometimes. And then Lorraine looks over at Jackson, who's getting dressed up because he's going to be in this scene. And she's like, oh, is that your boyfriend? And then Bobby Lynn goes, sometimes. Now they're getting ready to shoot the scene of Jackson, whatever his character is. He's in like a full baby blue leisure suit, super 70s. And he's going to be filling up the nozzle, and then Bobby Lynn, filling up gas with the nozzle. But Bobby Lynn has the idea of shooting it up like from below, so the nozzle looks like his penis, basically. And so they do that. Just like, it has nothing to do with the plot whatsoever, but just something I noticed is that gas was only 65 cents a gallon, so that's pretty nice. Get back in the car. They're driving. There's an interesting like transition back and forth between the like inside the gas station to the cows that they're about to pass. So there's like a bunch of cows in a farm, but there's a traffic jam because one of the cows got hit by a semi. And as they're driving through this accident, we do see the sheriff from the opening scene. Now, granted, that scene's not going to take place till a few, almost 24 hours later, but we see that same sheriff get out of the car. That's it. It's just like, hey, remember the guy from the beginning? And then next scene. They arrive at the farm. They're pulling in. I think there's some joke that Bobby Lynn says, like, thank God, like, I'm horny. And then Jackson's like, you're always horny, and it's like, well, okay, that. So they pull up. Wayne, he's the one that set all this up. So he's the one that goes to the door, knocks on the door. Here comes an old man. He pulls a shotgun out and points it at him and thinks like, you're from the county, ain't you? That type of thing. And, Wayne's just like, he's got his hands up and he's like, dude, like, we spoke on the phone. I'm here to rent the bunkhouse. Like, we already talked about this, that type of thing. He's like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember, he's an old man, and so there's that misunderstanding. The people in the car clock it. Maxine pulls a revolver out of the glove compartment, just like, hey, some shit's about to go down. Let's get ready. But, it's a misunderstanding. They realize that, so, everything's fine. But yeah, so then he points them down to the boarding house to get them set up and everything, walks them down there. I think they say, as they're about to walk down there, Maxine looks up in the window and sees the old lady, which we'll learn is Pearl, and also played by her, just with 8 hours worth of makeup on. They head down there. Howard, the old man, tells them how this bunkhouse was built for soldiers during the Civil War, and that, I think he said, like, they didn't, ever really see that much action, but it was there. And it's Texas, so probably not the good guys in the Civil War. Then Howard asks Wayne if he served in the military, and then I forget, he says something about like flat feet, something like that. But then Jackson pipes up, I served, I was a nom, like that type of thing. Now, I'm sure it's not hard to fathom that Howard, being an old white man in Texas, isn't too interested in what this black guy has to say. That's just the unfortunate fact of it. It's, it doesn't have to be outright said, but you can easily read between the lines because the lines are this far apart. And then Howard does just straight up, but he just like generalizes to everyone. He's like, I don't like it. I don't like y'all. My wife's there. You don't disturb us, that type of thing. Like, basically it's like, money's money, but just so you know, I don't fucking like any of you. No, that type of thing. And like, better not disturb her, and we're not gonna have any problems. just establishes that. As soon as he leaves, they bust the camera out and start filming a sex scene on the bed between Bobby Lynn and Jackson. While they're starting that scene, Maxine's not in that scene, so she's got her overalls on, basically just overalls, and she's heading out to the pond. She's got a cigarette. She's just out for a walk, maybe a swim. I mean, she does end up swimming. She gets in the pond, even though it's like the grossest looking water. It looks like straight up theme park water. It's like green and shit. I wouldn't get in there. But as she's swimming, we see Pearl like kind of watching her from the bushes. We also see a gator come out and like just barely miss getting her. Back at the bunkhouse, we see Wayne and RJ are like out in the hallway. They're like super excited about how this is turning out, and just like basically like this might have been said earlier, but one of the lines said by Wayne is like, if this does half the numbers of Debbie Does Dallas, then we're gonna be, we'll be set for life, that type of thing. So yeah, they're excited about how it's turning out. We get the like post, behind the scenes after the sex scene where Jackson's like standing in the window naked, like, and then Bobby Lynn makes this comment like, don't stand there like you just like accomplished anything or like you did anything. And he has some snarky comments like, oh, it seems to me like you liked it. And she's like, it's called acting. He's like, you just like, he says, you good, but you ain't that good. And then, she does her fake orgasm noise. And this is super awkward for Lorraine, who's already uncomfortable being there, as established earlier. And she's just there after, like, Bobby Lynn already threw her cum rag at her on accident. So then they get redressed to film the scene that happens before that scene. That's basically like the establishing scene of Jackson or whoever's character is arriving at the farm. The name of the film that they're making is called The Farmer's Daughter. So it's like, hey, my truck or my van broke down, whatever. Can I use your phone? And, Bobby Lynn's like the hot farmer's daughter, like, oh, well, we don't have a phone, but you can wait till daddy gets back or whatever, and but the funny, like, corny line that is in these types of movies is where she's like, it's like, well, he won't be back for a while, but would you like to ... come inside? And then but I like the like Kid Cudi's like expression after this. He's like, much obliged, and then comes in. We see Maxine. She's out of the pond. She had her swim. She gets her overalls back on. She's all wet. She's walking back towards the bunkhouse, and then she sees Pearl at the main house, like, kind of gives like a half wave, and then kind of like, come on, like, come over here. And so she hesitantly goes over to the main house to see Pearl. Pearl gets her some lemonade. She starts telling her stuff about, like, oh, she's looking at a picture of her and Howard on their wedding day. And then at some point in the hallway, she starts getting like a little handsy with Maxine. She like kind of rubs like right under her side boob, basically. And she's like, oh, what are you doing? And then Howard pulls up and she's like, oh, like, Howard's home, like, go out the back, like, don't let him see you, like, it'll be our little secret. And she's like, what? But goes ahead anyway, because she's just done with that situation, as anyone probably would be. On her way back, she runs into Wayne, and he's like, I've been looking all over for you. It's like, it's your scene, like, we're losing daylight, that. So she goes back into the house. She gets dressed for her scene. She's the other farmer's daughter, basically. And, like, Jackson runs into her and is like, oh, I was looking for your dad. And then, like, oh, your sister didn't mention anything about you. And then she's like, yeah, she's always been jealous. And then it's like, well, you better come inside here. Like, I don't want daddy to catch us. You wouldn't like daddy when he's mad. Which, is that a Incredible Hulk reference? But they start filming their sex scene in the barn. And as they're filming, Pearl is looking through like the window, like watching all this happen. And Pearl goes back up to the main house. She's talking to Howard and trying to like kind of let him know like, so we gonna get it on, like that type of thing. And he's like, I can't because of my heart. And so she's all horned up, but he's got bad heart, so she can't do anything about it basically. So then cut back to the bunkhouse. They're all sitting around. I think they just had their dinner and they're just sitting in the living room area. Lorraine says she has a question and then is just kind of like curious about like, hey, like you guys are kind of a couple, or talking to Wayne and Maxine. And it's like, so does it bother you that she was having sex with him? And he's like, hey, as long as the camera's rolling, then it's just business. That's their deal that they have basically. And so Lorraine's like, okay, so the camera changes things, that type of thing. And I think they keep talking about it a little bit, and and she's just been like you could kind of see like during the filming of the scenes that she is interested in what's going on, but you can't and I think that's what makes Jenna Ortega so good, is she's very good at like mysterious facial expressions where you can't 100% read what she's thinking. And which I like the ambiguity of it, because it's like you could see the interest, but you can't see the like disgust or the like, oh my god, I want to do this, that type of thing. So like she's like right in the middle, and all you can tell is that she's like interested in it. Jackson pulls the guitar out, he starts strumming, and then Bobby Lynn sings vocals for Fleetwood Mac's Landslide. It's a beautiful scene. Like it's so like unnecessarily like moving for some reason. I don't know. I think it just depends on my mood. There has been a time I've watched this where I've cried during this scene, and there's like nothing. I don't know. There's no reason for that. I must have just been having an emotional day. But every once in a while, this will get me just right. But it's just a nice scene, basically. So yeah, they sing the song. It does cut back and forth between them and Pearl and Howard, and then you can kind of see her, inner conflict about. Well, it sounds like funny to say, but basically like her inner conflict about being a horny old woman who can't have sex with her husband. That's basically like her thing going on, and then and then all the stuff with the young people in the bunkhouse. Once the song's over, Lorraine breaks the silence saying, I want to do a scene in the movie. And RJ immediately is like, no, and it's just like, well, why not? And he's like, just cause no. And so what I like about it is the fact that RJ was so like, I think he even like full on calls her a prude earlier in the movie, just like because she's uncomfortable with the subject matter of the movie they're making. And then as soon as she's like, after he's been spending all day talking it up, being like, oh, it's just this, it's like art, it's this, it's, the camera changes things, like all these different things, all these reasons why it's okay. But then as soon as she's like, well, I want to do it, then he's like, oh, wait, no. And, it's one thing, like, I'm not saying he can't have a boundary where he doesn't want his partner doing that. That's completely fine. It's just, I think that should have been brought up before that, or brought up right there in that moment. And it's like, hey, like, it's okay if, like, women want to do this. I just can't date someone that does that. You know what I mean? And it's like, Lorraine can also bring that up. And it's like, like if this is the type of movie you want to make, I don't really want to be a part of that, all of that's fine. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it could easily be like a certain type of viewer may view this scene as like, she's a villain, or, he's a pure villain, all that stuff. And I don't think either of them are supposed to be villains in this scene. I think it's just illustrating that importance of communication in a relationship and the establishment of those boundaries and everything like that, because it's very prescient now in a time of OnlyFans and stuff like that, because I'm seeing it a lot. I'll see a lot of posts about a woman that does that as a job and talking about oh, I went on this date, and as soon as the guy found out this, then, he didn't want to continue the date, or he didn't want to have more dates after that. And I will say, you go into the comments of that, and then it's just toxic masculinity 101 in the comments. But I will say it's I will, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. I will say, I think there's a lot of people that aren't fully thinking of the ramifications of that, and that's the immediate social ramifications of it, or the future ramifications on how you might feel about that. Not everyone is ashamed of it later on in their careers. I will say that. I think recently, I saw something a porn actress was is trying to get all of the videos of her taken down right now, because now she has kids and she doesn't want her kids to come across that. Now, what makes that a little different with her case is it kind of seems like she was forced into a lot of stuff, but I don't know. It's hard to say. It's I think, I don't know. It's very murky territory for sure, because there are definitely people that hey, I'm going to do this now because I need the money and whatever, and don't think about a thing. And then later on want to cry, ignorance or whatever. I'm not trying to say, if it's actual coercion, abuse, all that stuff, that's definitely wrong. I'm not trying to excuse any of that stuff. I just want to make that 100% clear. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's tough. But I will say, when back to the modern example of these OnlyFans models and stuff like that, it's not if you want to do that and you want someone who's okay with that, that's valid. I'm not saying that oh, I'm not like those dudes in the comments being oh, you're used up goods, you're trash, all that shit. That it's some bad shit in there, if you ever come across a post like that. But I will say, don't be wanting every single dude to be okay with what you do. It's one thing to I think people should be okay with what you do, just, whatever. But wanting every single partner to be okay with what you do, because that's insane. No matter what you're doing, if you're a cop and you're mad that this person that you're potentially going to date is oh, I don't really want to date cops for whatever reason. There's thousands of reasons, even if it's just I don't want to be worried about you every single night, whatever, or, moral stuff, whatever it is. Yeah, I think that's just one of the big problems with I think current dating culture right now. Take the OnlyFans out of it, take all that stuff out of it. Why are we expecting every single person to change their viewpoint to fit us, when we should just be looking for that person that just wants you for what you are, and not a molded version? It's oh, I would like you if you did this, and if you hit those boxes, then you can, it's well, then you just don't want that person because they don't fit those check boxes. But yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is if how you handle that situation may make you a bad person, but just because you don't want that in your partner, and that's just a boundary for you, fine, But if you're oh, I didn't know you were a fucking whore, and then then that's like, okay, that's way too far, obviously, and that's that's bad. But if you're just like, oh yeah, if I had known that, maybe we wouldn't have had this date, but thank you for telling me that, and that's just not something I'm comfortable with, and then blah 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 blah, and then you move on from there. I think there's okay ways to handle that, and then you don't have to compromise what makes you comfortable for someone else that you're not even having an established thing with. It's just like a first date. That's you don't owe that person anything, and that's man, woman, non-binary, whatever. You don't owe this first date person anything at all. You don't. That's because it's a first date. There's no established thing. And an argument can be made for like later, like in a relationship, about you don't owe this person anything, because it's at the end of the day you got to do what's okay for you. Yeah, I'm gonna go too far off the rails, so I'm just gonna I said what I said. Let's move on, into the scene, because I'm just gonna keep going and going and going. And also at the same time, it's like, why the fuck you listening to me? I'm just some dude. So yeah. The whole thing that got this started was Lorraine says she wants to do a scene in the movie. RJ, even though he was like defending this as an art form this whole time, all of a sudden is like, well, no, you can't do it, And then I forget what he specifically says about, like, that kind of makes it seem like, well, like, like, yeah, they can do it, but not you. I don't know. I forget if he says it right there or if it's later on when he's talking to Wayne. But yeah, she's, because he's keeps going on and on about, like, well, we can't change it, the script's already written and blah, 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 coming up with all these excuses on why she can't do it. Like, he like gave up on the, like, I think he probably realized in the moment that, like, oh, I can't fault you for, because I've been talking it up this whole time. But that now he's just like getting down into like the technicals and the things like that. It's like, well, the script is already written and it wouldn't make sense, and all that. And then she's like, no one cares about the plot on this movie. It's like they come to see tits and ass and a big dick, and then Jackson starts laughing, and then everyone kind of like gives a little bit of a giggle, and she's like, I'm sorry, but that's what it is. And then everyone else is just like, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, but it's just RJ that has a problem with it at this point. I think this is when Wayne pulls RJ out, and they go out front to talk a little bit, and it's like, dude, like, all right, it's this isn't the end of the world, and then he's just kind of calm him down a little bit, and RJ is like upset, and I think he, like I said in the last conversation, it probably should have been established earlier, but he's allowed to feel like that. It could be, you could be bummed out about it, just don't be the complete asshole about it. And then if this is a deal breaker, then maybe you don't continue with the relationship after this. That's just how it is. But he says, like, oh yeah, this is what I was thinking of before. So he says, he's like, but she's a nice girl. That's what RJ says about Lorraine to Wayne. And Wayne, at first he's like, hey, I'm dating one of them, so what are you saying about her? And then he's just like, oh, that's not what I meant, and then at the end of the conversation, Wayne goes like, I hate to tell you, man, but ain't none of them nice girls, and then walks off. So, and that's just old guy that, because I think he's like in his 40s or something, that hasn't had a good relationship, and then it's just once he's done with, well, had he survived this trip, once he was done with Maxine, probably just would have moved on to the next young one, and just moved down the line. He's not like, these aren't technically words of wisdom. They come off as words of wisdom, but this is also just like a sad, broken man that has not had like a good relationship, and as as someone that's like kind of in a similar situation, not I haven't had like that many or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, as someone whose relationships haven't turned out good, it's very easy to get into a mindset like that, and you just gotta not do that. I mean, easier said than done, but just that's what critical thinking's for. But yeah, Wayne talks him down, and he hesitantly goes back in and films the scene with his girlfriend banging Kid Cudi, and then we cut to everyone is asleep in the house except for RJ. He is in the shower in the dark crying. I've already talked about that. That's valid, but don't be hypocritical. That's all I'll say. But now this is where he goes into don't do that territory. It's like his feelings are valid. He's allowed to feel that if he wants, but as soon as he gets out of the shower, he goes to the counter, grabs the van keys, and he's about to leave all of them at the farm. So don't do that. There's no reason to be doing that. So yeah, he gets in the van, he starts driving off, but then as he gets to the top of the driveway near the main house, Pearl's standing in the middle of the road, blocking the road. And so he stops the car, stops the van, gets out. He's talking to her like, hey, like, you good? Because she's an old woman, so she could be like dementia, just out wandering, that type of thing. And he's just like making sure she's good. As they're talking, and as like he's been like driving and everything, it is Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper playing, and it's still playing as the van stopped. They're talking. She kind of makes a move on him, and he's just like, kind of backs off, like, what are you doing, And then she's like, all right, well, if my husband ain't gonna bone me and you ain't gonna bone me, then I'm gonna fucking stab you in the neck. And then just stabs him right there. So he starts bleeding, and then he falls on the ground. He's bleeding. She gets on top of him, takes the knife out, just stabs him a bunch of times until eventually blood is like shooting out of him onto the headlights of the car, and now everything is like a red tint, and Blue Oyster Cult is still blasting. It's awesome. I love it. It's so cool. It's such a good scene. I love the way it looks, and the choice of song, everything is just awesome. Cut back to the bunkhouse. Lorraine is in bed alone, obviously. She kind of like turns in her sleep, puts her arm out, and then we see her like kind of realize and wake up, realizing that like, hey, RJ is supposed to be there and he's not. So she gets up, she goes around the house looking for him, can't find him. She's about to go outside. I think she is outside, and then Wayne comes up and kind of scares her, not on purpose, but he scares her. She turns around. Wayne's just standing there like in not like full, like he's in briefs, but not like the standard tidy whities type. But yeah, he's standing there, and then he's like, oh, I'm just looking for RJ, and then have you seen him? And then he like hesitates, like she's like, hey, can you help me go find him? And he's like, okay, and then goes out looking. Does not put on any more clothes, just like continues to go out barefoot in only briefs. And then he goes to the barn to look while she goes towards the main house to look. She gets up to the main house. Howard comes out and first is like, hey, what are you doing up here? And she's like, oh, I'm just looking for my boyfriend. And he's like, well, my wife's missing too, so let's just look for everyone, that type of thing. And like, she gets confused sometimes, and you don't want to be out there without a flashlight, so brings her in the house and then sends her down to the cellar, I think. Cut back to Wayne. He's in the barn looking. I think he just assumes that RJ's in there because he starts like telling some like weird lame speech about women, and as he's like walking into the barn, he steps on a nail that's like sticking up out of a plank of wood, barefoot, just right in, and then he's on the ground like, fuck, I stepped on a fucking nail, I'm gonna get tetanus, all that stuff. And then just like, RJ, you even in here, that type of thing. I think he ends up, I don't know if it's because he hears a sound or something, but he crawls over to the other door, like, because there's the open door and then there's a closed door on the other end, and there's like some holes, and he's looking through the 3 holes, and so he like looks in the 1, 2, 3. As he's looking at the third one, here comes a pitchfork, 3 prongs go into all 3 holes, right into his eyeball. That pitchfork pulls out, eyeball pops out, and then he's dead on the ground with his eyeball like off to the side. And yeah, that's another like gnarly scene. But, and you know, we'll get into it more in the next episode, but it is the same pitchfork that Pearl will use on a victim in the movie Pearl. Just, you know, a little older at that point. So back at the main house, Lorraine's going down into the basement. She turns on the one light bulb, finds the flashlight, goes back upstairs. It's locked. And then she's like pounding on the door like, hey, like I'm stuck in here. It's locked, you know, and Howard's nowhere to be gone. Because at this point, it's, you know, I think at this point, the audience is well aware that this is all not going to go in the main character's favor. If not, like, even if we didn't have that opening scene where there's a bunch of dead bodies at this farm that we are now at. So she gives up and then she goes back down into the cellar like, hey, maybe, because a lot of times the cellars will have an in-house entrance and an out to the outside entrance, you know. So that way if you're out on the farm and a tornado comes, then you jump in there, you know. Very Wizard of Oz core. But yeah, she goes back down. She turns on a light and then she's looking around in the cellar and then her flashlight lands on a dead naked man hanging like chained like this. And Jenna Ortega gives one of the best screams in any horror movie ever at this point. And I'm not even going to attempt to try that, but, so good. And, quickly cut back to the bunkhouse where Jackson wakes up. I don't know if it's that he heard the scream, you know, kind of, because he was a nom, so he's got PTSD. And so if it wasn't that he heard the scream and that triggered a wake up, he was having a dream that triggered, you know, whatever. So he gets up and then Bobby Lynn's like, you okay? And he's like, yeah, you know, it's fine. Just, you know, go back to bed. He gets up, goes to the fridge, pulls out the carton of milk, and he's chugging some milk. And there is a missing persons man on the milk carton, and I didn't know until it was pointed out in this commentary that is the dead guy that's in the basement that Lorraine just saw. So, a little tiny Easter egg right there that's very easy to miss. But as he's sitting there chugging milk in the kitchen, he sees a flashlight outside and goes to the door, sees that it's Howard out there, and he's like, hey, you know, looking for my wife. You seen her? And he's like, no, I haven't seen her. We cut back to a wider shot of Jackson standing in the door, and you could just see the like silhouette of his penis that's like basically like knee length at this. I don't know if that's added or if that's really what Kid Cudi is working with, but you know, also a fun scene to be watching for the first time with your parents. But yeah, that's what Jackson's working with. I don't know if Kid Cudi's working with that, but it is just like funny because you just see it swinging in silhouette right there. And he's just standing there talking to Howard, and he's like, all right, you know, I'll help you look. Let me go get my skivvies. And then, so he goes back, grabs something to wear, you know, and then heads out to look for Pearl. As they're outside looking for Pearl, we see Pearl in the bunkhouse crawling into bed with Maxine. And before she crawls into bed, she gets completely naked and then gets into bed. So as she's basically like molesting Maxine while she's asleep, Maxine eventually wakes up. She screams. That wakes up Bobby Lynn. She comes to the door as naked Pearl is running down the hallway away, and she's just like, what the fuck, you know? And then goes to check on Maxine, and she's like, she was in my bed, you know, she was touching me, you know, freaking out, obviously, you know, as you should. And then back at the pond area where Jackson's out looking, and then he sees a flashlight out in like the reeds and stuff and thinks that Howard has fallen in. So he gets in the water and goes to like, he's like, hey, like, I was like, oh my God, like, you know, checking on him, and then he's looking for him and can't find him anywhere. And then I forget, I think he just hears Howard's voice, and then it's like, okay, well, that's not you. Then what, you know, what's going on? Gets up to the shore. Howard blasts him with the shotgun, blasts him into the water. Jackson's dead. So now RJ, Wayne, all the dudes are dead. So at this point, now some of this might be out of order, but it's this is the things that happen, and I'll get to the important stuff. But then, so Lorraine finds some axe, and she's chopping the door at the top of the stairs, trying to get out. Very Shining-esque, because it's just the one panel, and she's pulling her hand out and trying to get the lock with the one hand. Howard comes in and slices her hand. Then, she's screaming and crying and stuff. And Howard's just like, get back in there, Bobby Lynn has now gone outside looking for Pearl because she ran off, and finds her by the pond, like on the little dock. So she finds her on the dock and then starts talking to her, and Pearl's still naked out there. And then so Bobby Lynn wraps the blanket around her that she had around her shoulder, and she's like, hey, it's like, let's get you back this way, it's like, it's okay, like my Nana gets confused sometimes. And then that's when Pearl slaps her, and she's like, okay, I was trying to help you, but if you're gonna be like that, then I'm gonna leave you. And that's when Pearl pushes Bobby Lynn into the pond, and she immediately gets chomped by the gator. Then I forget who finds who first, but both Pearl and Howard find each other. Guess that they got all revved up from all this killing that they've done, so they go into the bunkhouse, and Pearl finally convinces him, like, let's do it, like it's gonna be okay. So they're doing it on the bed. Camera pans down, and we see that Maxine is hiding under the bed. So, she's got to get out of there. She does, like, finally escape out of there, like, while they're going at it. Gets to the main house, lets Lorraine out. Lorraine's like, even though Maxine just let her out, she's like, this is all your fault. Like, I should have never listened to you, yelling at her. She goes to leave out the front door, gets immediately blasted with a shotgun. She's dead. Howard and Pearl are out there, and she's like, oh, like, I told her to stay in there. And then Pearl's like, that's not the one I want. It's the other one. She's got something special. Like, this might not be when she said it, but she does say this at some point, talking about Maxine, like, she's got something special, like what I had. Well, we know it's played by the same actress, so that makes sense. But she's kind of obsessed with Maxine, basically. And that's the one that she wants to keep for whatever reason. I don't know if it's like sex slave thing or whatever it is, but that's the one that she wants. And Maxine's like around the corner hiding, and she's hearing this. So she knows like what she's in for if she's stuck there. Then, so Howard and Pearl are, they've shot Lorraine, and there's a conversation like, hey, let's get her inside, and then we can, throw her out in the... Oh, yeah, if we bring her inside, then we can argue self-defense for shooting her. So, that type of thing. And then they're also talking about, like, oh, we got to go get that guy and throw him in the pond, all this stuff, like how they're going to hide all these bodies, basically. And as they're dragging Lorraine's body into the house, she gurgles some blood while Howard's dragging her. This gives Howard a heart attack, and I don't think he dies right then and there, but he's going to if no one helps him, because Pearl can't do shit, and Maxine's definitely not going to help because they've been killing all her friends. So Maxine comes out with the revolver, like, pointed at Pearl, and Pearl's like, please help him, he's having a heart attack. And she's like, I don't give a fuck, and then goes to shoot Pearl, but the revolver's empty. Now, this was kind of mentioned earlier, where Howard had pulled the shotgun on Wayne, and after, like, the misunderstanding was discovered, and he realized, like, oh yeah, you are the guy that's supposed to be here and renting my bunkhouse. He says, like, don't worry, it's not even loaded. And Wayne says, yeah, I got the same thing in my glove box. So we know Howard was lying about that, but it turns out Wayne was not lying about that. It was just an unloaded revolver that he had. No ammo whatsoever. So Pearl gets up, so Maxine tries to shoot her. There's no ammo. Pearl stands up with the shotgun, goes to shoot Maxine, but Maxine is ducked out of the way. So Maxine avoided getting shot, but the kickback from the shotgun throws Pearl out into the yard, basically. So she's laying there. Maxine gets up. I don't know if it was already turned on, but the TV is going with that preacher that we saw in the opening scene. So TV's going off with the preacher. Maxine gets up, goes outside. Pearl's yelling there. It's like, "Oh, help me, please, my hip, my hip." And then Maxine's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna help you," And then, this is where she says, like, I don't remember if it's right now or in a little bit, but she does say the same thing that Pearl said to her. It'll be our little secret. And then she does like shush her. And then she gets in the car, backs it up, runs Pearl's head over, smash, and then peels out and leaves. She does one more line of coke while she's driving out, and then says something to herself about being a star. And then there she goes, final girl made it, and she's leaving. Now we cut back to the opening scene where it's the cops investigating the crime scene. The TV's on still, and this is where we see on the TV that this preacher is Maxine's dad, because he's like talking about all this sin and stuff and these sinners and how they took his daughter, and then they show a picture of a girl with the same freckles, just younger, and then he does say Maxine, so we know that that's her dad, is this preacher that's been on TV throughout the movie, because he was also on at the gas station that they stopped at. And then we cut back to the sheriff, and he's standing out front and just trying to like make sense of everything that happened. Here comes another deputy with the movie camera, and he's like, "Sir, we found this over there." And then he picks it up, and then they're like, "What do you think's on it?" And he's like, "What do I think's on it? One goddamn fucked up horror picture." And then credits. Cut to the X title screen, and it's that it looks like the original X rating from back in the day before it changed to NC-17, basically. But yeah, that's the end of the movie right there. But yeah, I really like this one. I wouldn't say it's my favorite of the three. I'll update this if I change my mind in the next ones, because this will probably be the first time in a while that I've watched them all closely together. But I would say Pearl's my favorite, then X, then Maxine. But I do like all three. Like, I know there's a lot of people that were very disappointed with Maxine. I think it was as good as the other ones? No, but I don't think it was disappointing in my. But I'll get more into that as we get to those episodes. But yeah, that's X by Ty West. Great movie, like I said. I really like this one. I hope you guys checked it out before listening to this. I'm sure a lot of people have just already seen this before it was even mentioned by me. But yeah, I really like this one, and I'm excited to get to the next few, especially Pearl, because like I said, that is my favorite one. But yeah, it's such a fun movie. It's the right amount, like for me, it's like the right amount of gore, comedy, sex, everything, it's just so cool. It's just such a fun movie. A24, like they can get it wrong sometimes, it's not like they're the like Rosetta Stone or the only litmus test for what makes a good movie, because there's some that suck, that's like any studio. But I do, regardless of the quality of every single movie, I love what they're doing, because they're killing it for an independent studio, and they're not the only one. Neon's also really good. But yeah, I appreciate all these indie studios that are like successful and putting out good movies and just doing the thing and keeping cinema alive, because that's what really matters at the end of the day. Good quality cinema that has heart. Whether you could put your full heart into it, and doesn't mean I'm gonna like it every single time, but I'm still appreciative of you doing what you wanted to do and just getting it out there. Because the more studio notes you get, and the more watered down it gets, and the more budget cuts, and the more all that shit just kind of can just chip away at the quality of a product. And I like when directors are just able to do exactly what they want. And that I think this is a good example of a movie that did that. But yeah, thank you guys for listening or watching, whichever one it is. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment if you want. The social media is just at Movies They're Pretty Good with no punctuation at all. Instagram is where I'm the most active, so shoot a DM, like comment, whatever. That's where I'm gonna see it. And YouTube comments too. I'll see shit on there. But yeah, thank you guys. Like I always say, I appreciate any support, even though I get very sarcastic about the like and subscribe stuff sometimes. And but I do appreciate anyone watching or listening to this. Thank you guys, and see you guys next week with Pearl. All right, thanks. Bye.